Hello, welcome to Conversations for the Moving Self. I am your host, Megan, a lifelong movement artist and facilitator. Each week, I invite you inside of the honest conversations that I have been having with some incredibly inspiring movement and well-being practitioners, as we unpack the beautiful roller coaster it is to pursue a lifestyle built around movement and well-being. Join us as we share and reflect on the moments where a movement lights your soul on fire, to the situations where you begin to question everything. Welcome to Conversations for the Moving Self. Today I have Alethia and Antonia here. Alethia is a British Caribbean UK-based choreographer, performer, teacher, and researcher. Their interdisciplinary practice weaves movement, voice, and research to explore identity, feminine blackness, accessibility, and decolonization, using dance as a space for reimagining and healing. Alethia's work has been presented across theater spaces, galleries, and film contexts in the UK and internationally. And they're currently a workplace artist at The Place and a Midlands for Cities funded PhD researcher at De Montfort University. I had the pleasure to meet Alethia during my graduation choreographic process at London Contemporary Dance School, and I could not have been more grateful to have met Alethia at this time, and just knew from that day like I would look up to Alethia forever. Witnessing Alethia's process firsthand was, I think, yeah, a process that really changed my understanding of how a process could feel. And especially in a time where the group that Alethia was creating on was dealing with a lot of feelings with this impending change. I just felt really, really held and supported, and equally like I was really pushed to explore my own movement and equally step into Alethia's world, which I think is just such a gift. And yeah, I'm super excited to catch up with Alethia today. Alethia is someone who always brings a sense of warmth, care, and compassion as they enter spaces, and has just such a clear diligence and dedication to their practice. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
We'll start today just with how you're showing up for your movement and well-being practice today, how you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. I was teaching this morning, so that I guess was my first entrance into my body. A lot of times before I teach, I kind of try to do my own kind of centering. I feel like teaching's a lot of giving, and in a sense like holding space for others. So I always try and find a moment for myself to kind of check in where I'm at. This morning I was quite tired. So there was something that I decided was that I needed to move a little bit to allow whatever I was feeling to be present in the body and move through that. So I joined in a little bit at the beginning of class and then yeah, taught class, and that was my physical practice for the day. From when you've been in class with me, I always come like in and out and try and move with people because I think that's such a thing that I enjoy when I'm teaching is how do I also move with people as I'm teaching as well. And then I guess also for my well-being, because like I said, I was quite tired. I got back to my apartment and then I had a nap. And that was rejuvenating. I definitely needed it. My energy levels have been like in and out the last few weeks. So yeah, there's this element of like going into the body, then there's also an element of rest today.
It's I think I resonate with the nap element as well. Not specifically today, but I was saying to someone this week that like I'm not someone who normally naps a lot, and I'm noticing at the minute I just keep accidentally napping. Um, but yeah, I guess it's also maybe it's something with like wintering or the season that we're in, or and then also just different projects coming up in paces of life. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing. I liked what you said as well about like when you were speaking around how to show up for yourself before entering like a teaching space and having to give a lot. but then also that like your movement practice doesn't need to be something that solely exists outside of your class, that
Mm.
to be with the people is also part of how you give more authentically and show up for where they're at and where how you can yeah meet them in the space and then take them through the
Yeah.
class.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm teaching this week, but I also used to guest for this company that I'm teaching. So I kind of know firsthand, not what they're feeling specifically within the process they're in, but many times I've come to class and been like, okay, how do I enter this when I'm tired? It's been
Mhm.
a long week, and I think there's something I always try and remember when I'm teaching and creating about this, like other side of the performer's experience and how that can and how often I think some choreographers might forget that or teachers might forget that what it means to show up every day and push the body and also push the mind and be able to like take care of yourself in that as well. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's something I was thinking about today.
Yeah, I really like that, and I want to remember to come back to that. I have a thought.
Mhm.
But first, I would like to shift now into just if you could share a little bit more about your entry into movement and yeah, how the movement journey started in your life.
Yeah, I think I've always moved. I think my parents would definitely vouch for that. I think from the moment I was born, I was connected to music and movement, but never really. I think I always wanted to dance or to take dance classes, but when I was younger, that wasn't really a possibility because of family circumstances. So it wasn't until I think I was around 14, I would say 13, 14, where I finally convinced my mom to let me go to dance class. And it was street dance and did a little bit of disco. And I think I had no memories. I actually also did a little bit of tap. Um, Tap and like ballet was like half an hour a week. Um, and I guess that was my introduction to movement in relation to like learning techniques. Um, but even at that time, I remember my favorite sort of movement was just putting on music and dancing in my bedroom still. Um, and yeah, that kind of just grew. And then I think when I was like 16, 17, I had to decide kind of what I wanted to do going into college. And there was a decision between music and dance. And I was questioning this the other day. It's like, why did I choose dance over music? But I think there was something about movement and dance connecting those two worlds that really kind of resonated with me at the time. And then the kind of rest is history as I've gone through
Yeah.
training into the sector.
Yeah. And like when the soul just says it has to happen.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Super wholesome. And something I've been thinking about in my own personal life at the minute is like prioritizing sustainability and preventing burnout in different chapters of your life and what that looks like. And with the story of movement in your life at the minute, how is that looking for you right now?
Ah, this question's quite hard for me right now,
Yeah,
in all
it's a
honesty. It's weird because I've been reflecting on this a lot at like this stage I am at now, and I think maybe if I'm thinking back to like when we first met, I remember at that time doing the creation on your group that there was a lot of things happening, and I was managing a lot of different um things as in working with the group, but also my PhD, my performance work, all of the other things that I was doing at the time, and there was a real sense of like, how do I hold all of this? And hold all of it and do a good job, but also hold all of it and not crash by the end of it. I can't remember if I succeeded, to be honest, I'm thinking. Um, but I remembered at that time there was this real sense of trying to like juggle and manage things and really trying to take care of myself outside of the studio and there's pockets of space that I had. But I think now the notion of like sustainability is a little bit more, I think, central, and I've had to put a lot more boundaries in place to allow for that. Um, I was like diagnosed with ME last year. And I think I've been dealing with it for quite a few years, but it affects my energy. And I've really had to kind of because I took a break last year and I've come back now into working and moving and making um, and I've really had to kind of think about how I put frameworks in place in order to keep doing what I love to do. Um, and that's been quite difficult in a way of like learning to say no more often, learning to know that actually, in order to maybe fulfill an obligation, that the push might not be in the way that I'm used to. It
Mm.
might feel like it's not enough sometimes, and it might feel jarring for someone who's, I guess, maybe used to a different way of working. But I think it's really forcing me to reconsider what it means to still have rigor within a practice while also taking care of me as a human and me as a physical being as well.
Mm. If I was on like iMessage text, I would just be like emphasizing everything you said. Um, because I think, yeah, I guess it's a big part of, I think, why I also wanted to start the podcast is this kind of conversation because a lot of times it feels like there's two approaches and like you have to pick one or the other. And I think I'm constantly trying to be like, no, we can do both. I want to
Yeah.
do both. And I
Mhm.
want to make it a long story and how because it is like for most people, and I hope for most people that it comes from a place of love.
Mhm.
And how can we allow that to coexist alongside like a healthy love?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, well, I know in myself, I think I've faced similar things of like how to implement boundaries in a way that still, yeah, allows me to feel the like full extent of the love and the passion and like it in rigor and on fire, and then equally like, okay, we want the fire to like keep burning and not just fizzle out. And
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you for sharing like how it's going for you now. And yeah, I think it's a question that probably most of us have to ask like over and over again rather than like one time and one answer. Even what you were saying of like what it looked like when we met versus now is going to be different. And especially as a freelancer, like with the circumstances always changing, then that's probably even more of a thing that maybe us artists or movers that we're facing.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
I think there's always a thing for me, for myself, and also when I'm teaching or creating, is about leaving enough space for people to grow into something. And my job
Mm.
is then how do I hold them while they go through that? And it might not be sometimes comfortable in some ways, but it's always, I guess, safe. For me, it's always safe. And I think there's something about me not quite maybe previously not quite knowing how to do that for myself because there's no one else holding me in that. So I think I'm starting to try and understand, okay, how does that practice exist within I guess more of a solo way. But then there's also this idea for me of like, how do we build community around that? That doesn't have to be just a process or a very specific like freelance job. That actually, how do we create community that we can hold space for each other to allow each other to grow and develop while still um, feeling held and nurtured and I don't really have any answers for that, but I think that's what I'm starting to kind of like try and
Yeah.
compute in my
Mm. I love it. I love everything about it. And I think I've been, because I'm teaching like 6 days a week at the minute, and this is the
mind.
first time that I'm in that space and not, well, yeah, I think it's the first time I've ever been teaching that much, but then also like I'm taking a lot less class than I used to and doing a lot more self-practice and yeah, I think asking very similar questions. But I love what you said about wanting to create a space for someone to grow into something, but then equally how to hold them in that journey. And I think I felt that in your process a lot, actually, which I
Mm.
think is maybe what like made it feel so impactful was this. I actually remember you saying something, and I'm not gonna remember the exact wording, but like
Yeah.
we were talking about uh, a company that had done like an intensive over winter break, and then I was wearing like the t-shirt, and we were
Oh yeah.
talking, and I remember then we were talking about like different processes with different companies and how to be able to enter a space with a choreographer and be seen as an ongoing like evolving being.
Mhm.
And yeah, uh, I remember then getting into the conversation and you saying something around how much you value and want to be able to create a space where it's like you can come into the room and not have the thing that you do on day one doesn't need to be what it looks like on stage and that like as a choreographer also that's already where your thinking was. I think
Mm.
just like allows a mover to enter the space and show up more authentically and also then be able to take more risks,
Yeah.
try things out and explore and instead of
Mm.
the processes where maybe it feels more like you have to come in and what is generated on day one is what the piece is and not that that's bad but maybe it's a different time configuration as well but like I think for me I found that process the way that you held that process very beneficial for how I work in a
Mm.
space and very safe and very inviting maybe is a good word to
Mm.
describe how I felt.
Yeah. It's interesting, and this is like maybe my last thing to say on this, because I could blab forever, you know me. Um, but it when you said that, because I'd forgotten that, but when you said that, it reminded me of. So I did another creation on a kind of a similar size group in November, October, and it was we had 4 weeks to create the work, and I could feel from inside that there was that gap I created. I could tell that like what I was seeing on stage wouldn't be on that point wouldn't be what would end up being at the premiere or as they tour it. Um, and I remember that there was some I could feel that some dancers maybe were getting frustrated with the fact that it wasn't there yet. Um, and I don't know if I just thought this or actually said it. I hope I actually said it. But I felt like I needed to say that I trust you.
Mm.
I see your potential and I trust that you will get there. And I have to leave that space with that in order to give them the opportunity to grow. Otherwise, they will always be sitting on what they are now. And I
Mm.
think in a way it's a little bit scary as a choreographer because obviously you want your work to, to be good. But I feel like a lot of what I've come to feel like I value in working with people is being able to do that and kind of take a step back and see that as just as important as something being polished or clean on stage because that in its essence is the work. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, when you said that, that just reminded me of yeah, it's still a thing that I think I subconsciously still strive for, I guess.
I am in love with this concept and I think it I'm working with some young dancers at the minute on some pieces for a competition, and it's some of their first times like competing for something. And we've been having a lot of conversations around like that concept. And yeah, then they're also they're they're feeling their feelings, their parents are witnessing the process, and then I'm witnessing their process as well. And just the same like idea of like if I've been saying to them like if it was easy when you first learned it, you'd be bored by the time you have to do it. And I feel like it's the same concept. Like it's the exact same thing, but maybe when it becomes, I don't know. I don't know if I have the answer to this either, but like I guess I feel like that's something that was regurgitated, said to me a lot when I was young because I did do a lot of like competition stuff when I was young. But then I feel like at one point I lost that sense of it, and it was like maybe it was because it was shifting into more of a professional context. Maybe it was because it was I don't know. But
Mm.
how, yeah, how can it just exist like simply as the same way like you buy clothes as a kid that are big enough for you to last not just the day you buy them, but to like
Yeah,
wear them, you know?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, God, it makes a lot of sense, but in the process, it can feel so much more complicated. And then you add uh, the percent because actually I feel a little bit lucky. Lucky might not be the right word, but I'm in a new situation where I've always been the one choreographing for the competitions, but this
yeah.
set of competitions that they're doing, it's a pre-choreographed sequence that they have to learn. And so
Mm.
I actually don't have any, I mean, yes, I have a lot of responsibility in making sure that they're held in that process, but like in terms of the artistic vision, it's not
Yeah,
as in my hands. So maybe it takes a bit of the pressure off in that way, but it's just interesting
yeah,
the relation between those two.
yeah. I like the t-shirt analogy of like,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And also what you said about trust feels really, really key and brings me on to another question that I had because in the process that I was in with you, you had shared the rehearsal schedule. Like I think we had like 4 or 5 weeks as well.
Yeah.
And it was I think from like week one, you had shared it with us just in a very, here's the Google Drive thing to my Google Sheets. And as a person in the process, being invited into your internal process and where you were going, and not just in like, okay, we're gonna, I don't know, it was broken down in the way that I felt like I was just stepping inside your brain, which I think made it really easy to then step inside your brain in the space and be able as a mover to trust even if things were to change that like I'm held in that process and equally as a mover I think felt very relaxed in the awareness of how to pace myself like and obviously
Mm.
I don't always get it right but like to be able to know what's coming just means that as the dancer in the process, I was able to show up more because I knew how to manage that intention. And I just
Mm.
wondered, I've always wondered this like since that process because it's something that I think I really held on to. And now when I'm in the creative process, I try my best to do it with the dancers as well because yeah, it really shifted everything for me. But when that came into play for you and maybe if you use it now or how it's looking for you now, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think the creation that I did with you was probably my first time working with a group of that size for such a long period.
Mm,
Um, so it was definitely like it was definitely a lot of firsts. So think I think that was the first process I'd ever done that in. And I think the reason I did it was because I think a lot of how I end up working ends up being a reflection of, okay, what did I need when I was performing, or what do I continue to need as I'm performing? And I think from that perspective, there's always been a thing with me around energy management, weirdly. Maybe it's because of freelancing and knowing that, you have different obligations to hold. Um, but there was always something for me that I always found it helpful for myself to know what was required of me so I could physically and psychologically prep for that.
mm,
Um, And so I think with your group, that was kind of my first time. Like, let me try and see if I can provide at least a framework for people. Um, and I was aware that things might change. That's a creative process, but how can I give enough of the information about how I'm imagining this process to go in order for people to be able to show up in a way that helps them, but also in essence helps me also to get the most from them. Um, and I still use it now. I haven't used it in every process. When it's a shorter process, I don't tend to. Um, and then also if it's a process that I'm gone off the back of something and I don't have the physical time, that's also been, because it does take time.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that is the only, I guess, downside to doing it. It does take a lot of labor on my part to think about the 5 weeks that we have and then work like the individual parts of the process, and the timetable's changing every day, and this person might be ill, or this, so there's like or this person has an audition, or yeah, yeah. um and but I feel as though if I'm able to, then I will put my time and energy to do that, because I feel like it does help hold um
Mm,
a process. Um, but I guess that's also this kind of thing of like, the things that support the space, but might require a little bit more forward planning or a little bit more labor to begin with, in the hopes that it will might help within the process itself.
yeah.
Um, and it's interesting when you're saying about kind of you felt like it gave you kind of an insight into my creative process of my brain. Um, because I think over the last couple of years, I've also started using like video editing quite a bit. Um, my processing speed is shocking. Like when I'm watching, like I think it's got worse as well. But sometimes I'm watching things and there's so many things happening that I can't quite like see, or I feel like I need people to do things over and over again in order to figure out what might work. So I've kind of adopted a little bit more a process that requires me to do a lot of video editing, so I can like, okay, this material goes in here, and then that's on this count, and da da da, and then I can show people visually what's going on in my brain so that they know what we're aiming for. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's worked quite well, but it also once again takes a lot of labor to do. Um, so yeah, this thing of like labor and sustainability and all gets kind of tied up in like that. Um, but I think for my process, it's definitely something that I found helpful.
Yeah. I had a flashback when you were talking about the video editing as well, because I think you did
Did
some
I
yeah.
did. It's expanded.
And yeah, I forgot about it. I was like, oh
Yeah.
wow, yeah. But I think it makes a lot of s- I definitely felt that result in the process of like, oh, okay, now, but I also think I'm also a very visual person, and so it was super helpful for me in that way of just I'm choreographing at the minute on all the groups that I'm working with. Like we're working towards a big show at the end of the year. And they keep little questions will come up where it's like, oh, do you want this or this? And then I'm like, we're gonna have to do both versions, and I'm gonna have to watch it like
Watch
three
it.
times. But
Mm.
it is, yeah, such a thing of just like how to support yourself based on your needs, but then also equally like chaos and contradictoriness. It's definitely not a word,
No,
but
I get what you mean though. I get what you mean.
of making a process like, this is the best way for me to work, and then also being like, okay, that is a really great way, but it takes 10 times as long, and
Yeah.
then how we find the middle. It also
Mm.
made me think of, I don't even know who shared this with me, but someone that I was working with at one point was like, "Oh, if I'm just kind of staring off into space, I'm actually just like zooming out so that I'm not seeing like one dancer because I get really invested in like watching the performer as a performer, and I try to just
Mm.
glaze over sometimes to see like what would it be like if I was on stage, not if
Mm.
they were on stage." And I've noticed I try to do it every once in a while, but I've noticed that I am the same where I like think I connect a lot with the individuals in the space, and so then it gets easy for me to zoom in on one, and I have to be like, okay, no, 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 no. What's the big picture when I'm, watching the run or whatever. Uh,
Mm. That's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah. And it's like, because you'll know from like the press I did with you that I do like in all my work, there's a lot of solos. There's a lot of solos, and I build the world basically around the solos. So I feel like I always have like this thing of like really trying to understand not only physically the person, but like, their personality, what fits them best. So I kind of like painstakingly have to like figure out, okay, do they go here, or if that switches, and like in a way I think it'd probably be easier if I didn't care, but
right.
but I do. So I have to kind of yeah, I think there's like I guess strategies like this thing of like zoning out or um sometimes I'll number people. Like I never number people. Like sometimes if I'm getting too like locked into individual people, I have to be like, let me just number you so we can do something formationally, then I can get around to the other
Yeah,
things later.
you can
Um
worry about you can remove it and go back to
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
Um but yeah, this contradictoriness of like um finding things that work for you that also might not be the most time effective, or maybe are, but they take a lot of time, and then how you equate or like balance those two can be
Have you
can be a
ever used Notion before?
notion. Is that
It's like
like a
a
no?
planner thing online, yeah.
Oh, I've tried. It don't
Okay.
it doesn't work for me. I think
So
a lot of those like planner things get quite confusing. Um but
I have a friend in who is obsessed with it, and I have like a love-hate relationship with it, and I think they do as well. But we both had like downloaded a template recently because someone that we follow had made a template and it looked cool, and so we tried it. And the other day we were on a call because I was like, I don't even know how to use the template. But where we were going with it was like it was some sort of project planning template,
mm,
using it for different projects. And she made a comment to me like as we were talking through something, and she was like, I don't know. I don't even know if it's actually helping now or if it's just fun, but actually taking
mm,
10 times as longer and distracting from the project. But I'm just gonna live in it for a few more like days or whatever. And I was like, I relate so much to that feeling sometimes of like, I also think I just enjoy like nerding out about that parts of that,
mm,
like the details of the process sometimes. And then sometimes I have to remind myself, like, okay, okay, step back. Like, what's the goal? What's the outcome that we're like working
yeah.
towards? And what's then relevant to work towards a sustainable
Yeah. I guess
cycle?
there's the hope that you like over time you learn the things. Like you take on things and you drop things. You take on things and you drop things. And then it becomes more and more kind of the I guess the essence of what you need rather than the kind of extra stuff that you don't. But yeah, it can be quite a long process. I don't think I'm there yet.
It's hard. It's hard. Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit now, I
Okay.
wanted to come back to this when we were speaking at the beginning about like being a performer versus a choreographer,
Mm,
and those how when you're in the other role, how to step out of yourself almost and
mm,
uh see what that looks like.
mm,
And I wondered, kind of maybe actually both sides of it. Like what's coming up for you? You spoke a little bit about like as a choreographer, how that's an intention of yours to be able to zoom out and remember what it potentially is like for the people inside the process.
Mhm.
And also maybe how it comes up in when you're in the performance role or the dancer role. And what things help you do that? Like how do you
Mhm.
encourage that process to happen for yourself inside another process, if that question makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, it does. I think it does. So apologies if my answer is like not what you wanted at all. Um, I think the first thing comes to mind because I've been doing a little bit of writing about it is so a few years ago I created a solo work. And in that I was both choreographer and performer. Um, and that taught me a lot about the conflicts between the two roles. I almost felt like there was two selves in a way. You know, there was the choreographer self that had this kind of idea of what the piece should look like, and that had choreographic ideas in relation to movement and structure. And then there was the performer self that had a sense of my story and how things felt in the body. And there was always kind of a bit of a like having to switch between the two.
Mm.
Um, and then there was also a moment I felt like towards the end of that process where I was actually, as the choreographer, had to be like, it's my performer self's responsibility now. It's no longer my
Mm.
choreographic self. And I think that definitely hasn't like that reflection of what those two roles requires definitely kind of stuck with me as I kind of shift between the roles outside of that process. As and I think there's also and sometimes it can be quite frustrating as well in essence of um how I say this um especially when I've been in processes where the choreographer might not have considered the other perspective. um and I think how I do that is to consciously, if something's being relayed to me or there's something that I'm seeing someone struggling with, is like trying to then kind of place myself in their situation and like myself in that situation and try to understand and like remove my ego from it and think about, okay, how would me as a performer feel in this situation? What are the things that I
Mm.
know are coming up? There might be some insecurities. There might be some sense of like, I don't know what this movement is. There might be a sense of I've no idea where this process is going. There might be a sense of, you know what, we've been rehearsing for 6 days and my body's tired. I,
Yeah.
and they're quite easy things to kind of remember and then be able to think about from the other side as like a choreographer thinking about a performer. But I think already when I'm planning things or taking on jobs as a performer, I'm already thinking about how do I make sure that I don't even have to do that because I've done it beforehand, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
Yeah, yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
But it can be difficult. I think more and more I'm shifting away from being a performer in other spaces just because of, I think the more I've been in this industry, the more I've kind of, I guess, started to figure out what I value and what I don't, and what my boundaries are in relation to certain things. So that makes it quite difficult to stand in spaces with certain certain people within certain frameworks. Um, so yeah, I think that's my convoluted answer.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And it reminded me of a conversation I was having with a friend recently about like the same concept, but in relationships. of like
Mm,
the older we get or like the more experience we have, well, the more times we try something, the more you learn what you like and what you value and what you believe in, and then the things that feel aligned get more specific and more prominent when they align, and then equally there's more of the
none
not
of
that one. I don't want that. And just
yeah.
yeah, like what it brings up, and in some ways it's an incredible feeling, and in other ways it's a frustrating feeling, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
just interesting. Like I also think a lot of times for me, well, and I think I believe that this is a wider experience, but that just my movement realizations often are paralleling my life realizations. Like they're
Yeah. Yeah.
very coexisting experiences for me. But I
Yeah.
think also because I entered movement from a dance space that does pull in such a emphasis on the like what's going on in life or what's going on in the
Yeah.
world. Or
Mm.
like, yeah, I feel like maybe I had this experience somewhere super random, but
Okay.
was I ended up in this situation where I was like not babysitting, but like hanging out with someone and her kids. And
Mm.
there we were like together for like a whole week, and so there was moments where I was like, oh, I'll just like hang out with them for a bit, like you can go have some me
Mm.
time. And ended up playing soccer a lot, like football a lot, and I hadn't done that since I was a kid,
Mm.
and I would like in that much capacity like did a lot of football for a few days and was just like, wow, my lens on football now is so infiltrated almost by my dance experience, where I was like, number one, thinking about movement as a dance concept in a football setting, but also just like thinking, like analyzing it in a nerdy way, and but also
Mm.
just, yeah, a lot more present and maybe how I felt about it, where like I think my association with football as a kid was just like, I don't want to be hit with the football in the face by another like 7-year-old boy anymore. Like I'm over that. And so it was cool to just like step into a movement practice that has more of like a sports side of it, but in
Yeah.
a way that I think also I wasn't the kid I was playing with was 7. So like the stakes weren't like, I
We're very
wasn't
low.
yeah, we were just
Mm.
playing back and forth. So I guess I had more time to think than if I was playing like a proper football game with other
Yeah.
adults or something. But yeah, it just made me aware of this overlap between like feeling and movement for me,
Mm.
like embodied experience or yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah. I feel in relation to that, just like I feel like I will sometimes wonder if like, who knows how long I'll be dancing for professionally, but like will there still be echoes of the way I think about movement, the way I think about my body and how I conceptualize myself through movement? Will echoes of that seep through into other things and I'll be like, oh, that's from this or that's from this and that. I
Yeah.
think that's quite interesting because I do see that a lot in like people that may have, danced when they're younger or they trained at university and then might have gone on to do other things. There's still a kind of essence of what their body has gone through
Mm.
that training that I think allows them to think about things outside of dance and experience things outside of dance in a slightly different way that I think kind of almost connects us all in a way that I think anyone that hasn't been through that can quite maybe quite understand. But
Mm.
yeah, it's made me think of that.
It's interesting. I'll be curious to see what we discover. I would love to, just because I'm curious more than
Mhm.
anything, I'm curious what you're interested in exploring physically right now. Through
Mm.
movement, through like whether it's dance or other practices, or just like, yeah, what you're feeling interested in, what you're feeling connected to, inspired by.
This is quite a difficult question, I think, for me right now. Um, because I've not been so much in my moving body as I think I have been in the past. Um, but there was something coming up for me yesterday. So like I would say I'm teaching this week and then I've been ill for the last couple of weeks, so I haven't really been moving and um so came into it feeling like, oh God, I don't know where my body's gonna be at. And um I've been like demonstrating things and have been feeling as like this feeling of like I don't want to say I'm gonna say I feeling a little bit of grief. Um and I was trying to kind of analyze that in relation to like, okay, what is that? And I think there's almost like a little bit of grief in relation to a version of myself that I might have been last year, the year before. And I was just starting to think about like, okay, is there ways that me as a mover, as a maker, as a teacher can be present and find value in the different versions of myself that I will come across. Um, because I was starting to think, I was like, okay, why am I getting upset? And I was like, because as we move through life, life happens, our bodies change, how we think about life and our values change. Um, and, you know, there's never going to be a static version of who we are. And if we are constantly grieving the versions of ourselves, we never quite harness the power of the new versions of us. Um, so I think what I'm interested right now is trying to understand about this version of Alethia and how they move, how they think, what they feel like is important. Um, and then if that shifts, then I get to know that version. Um, but yeah, I'm interested in that and letting go of this feeling of grief of something that is no longer present. Um, yeah, if that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense. And I have a lot of thoughts. Uh, First, it reminded me of this book that my one of my like childhood best friends has been obsessed with since we were children. And don't even remember the name of it, but I remember her always telling me about this one part of the book where it speaks about the different versions of ourself like being stacked on top of one another just to make the current version of ourself, and that
Mm,
we never lose the past version, but it just evolves. And I think as you were speaking, it just reminded me of that like image because I always then like imagined like just little like figurines of people like stacked on top, but
mm,
in a shape of the person. Like, I don't know. Second, it also something that I think I would like to take away of this, yeah, just this idea of like getting to know who we are in the present moment, because like you said, it is constantly changing. And in some ways that's really cool, and in some ways that's like it's such a complex feeling, you know, like um and then also like this concept of like the body physically aging, like bringing I teach a class at the minute that is 16 and up, but it's adults, and it's like
mm.
the configuration of the group is kind of like a group of 16 to 18-year-olds, and then like a group of like 30s and up ish,
Okay.
something like that. There's a little bit of a
Very,
gap.
yeah.
And I teach it on a day that I also teach an over 60s group in the morning. And I think on that day of the week, I just feel very like in awe of the way that like maturity and equally innocence like brings to what it brings to physicality. And
Mm,
yeah, something that I think it's something that I'm interested in, and something that I don't think ever will be a finite answer, like because it is both of those things are ongoing. They're constantly changing as well.
mm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And also allow how to allow the grief to happen and equally to live in the present. Like and equally the future.
Yeah, the future.
Oh, it's difficult.
Mm, yeah. And it's when you're just talking now, it just reminded me of a couple of years ago, I think now, I was working with a group of dancers that were 50 plus, I want to say. Um, and yeah, it was one of the most beautiful experiences. I think I was working with them the same time I was working with your group because I had to leave at some point and like go
Yeah,
between the two.
yeah.
And I remember that also being quite interesting because I one group was, 50 plus, and then one group was, last year of training at a conservatoire. So, and I remember reflecting on it and this and I think we were talking a lot with the older group about, the value of older bodies and dancers. And I was really seeing like that I wasn't really changing how I was working. And I was seeing a lot of beauty across the two groups. And there was something that the older dancers were bringing in relation to experience, maturity, and presence that maybe the younger group didn't. And then obviously there were some things that, that maybe wasn't accessible to the older dancers that maybe the Alpha DS group it was. And it was nothing was better, it was different. And there was something about actually embracing this idea of difference as a thing that is beautiful rather than something that we should kind of so
Shove
something we
away.
should kind of shove away. So yeah, that also made me think about what I was thinking yesterday in the essence of like, oh, one day I will be that 50-year old,
Mm,
hopefully, and still
yeah,
embodying that version of me. And who knows what that who knows what that will feel like.
yeah. It makes my heart happy. Uh, I'm aware of time, so let's shift into the closing question,
Yes.
which is from Rose. Rose would like to ask how you would like the experience of watching dance in the theater to change for both the audience and for the artists.
My first thought goes from like audience perspective. I
Mm.
hope that it changes in a way that the theatre becomes more accessible. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. Like, I've not seen a show in a theatre for a while. Um, because every time I look at the prices, I'm like, wow.
Mm.
And it makes me think about all the people that could be seeing art that can't purely based on their like economic circumstances. And then that then ties in for me to the artists and the fact that there's so many artists making amazing work, and especially artists that might be making work for a particular audience that might never get that audience into the theatre because so there's this kind of cycle of the cycle of artists not being able to make the work because the audience is there, but the theatre isn't accessible for the audiences. So then we see the same things that cater to the same people, and there is not this, and there's not also the economic climate for people to take risks in relation to that.
Mm.
And yeah, so I think that is my wish, a bit bleak. Um, but that actually there's a way of finding a way that more people can access art. And maybe that is it not being in theatres. Maybe that's something that like maybe imagining how we watch work. But I think fundamentally, I don't know how much it matters about what gets put on stage if no one, the people that really need to see it can't.
Mm.
That's my answer
Yeah,
to that.
yeah, but it's even if it's like hard truth, it's a truth. Like it's a important thing I think to highlight because also if we don't talk about it, then it's never gonna do anything at all.
Yeah.
Um, mm. I hope for the same. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it where you left it because I think that's
There's so much that you
what
could
I want
say.
to be said. I could go on
So,
for like so long. Um, Thank you so much for everything, for
thank
sharing
you.
and for, yeah, just the time and your energy and being so open about your process. I think I missed like being in your little world, so thank you for sharing as well.
It's been really
And
nice to like reflect back on things as well. So
yeah.
yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Mm, thank you to all the listeners for listening as well. If you have any questions for Alethea or any like thoughts, things that stood out, please leave them in the comments below. And we'll be back for our next episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of season 2 of Conversations for the Moving Self. If you've been here since the beginning, thank you so much for tuning in again. And if you're just joining now in the past couple episodes, I really wanted to say a big thank you for taking some time to listen, to hear these incredible conversations with some really important people to me. This podcast is a passion project and something I feel really, really excited about, but we can only continue to do it with your support. I invite you to follow, subscribe, like, and comment. Please share the podcast with any other listeners that you think might be interested. And if you have any reflections, please, please, please comment them down below. Super excited to be sharing these all with you and looking forward to the rest of the season. Thank you so much from CMS. Lots of love.